Hello, Taylor Weller. Thank you so much for joining us at the Post-Pandemic Pivot Summit. It's such an honor to have you among us today.
Thank you, Claudia. My pleasure.
Well, let me make a brief introduction about you for anybody who's living under a rock and has not heard about you just yet.
Okay.
So Tyler is a financial planner that wrote a book recently that is called The Pursuit of Purpose. If you have not come across his book, the link is right below this video. I strongly recommend that you get this book. It is so timely. So having Tyler with us today is such an honor and right up to the space that we want to discuss during this summer. So Tyler, as you know, this summit, the main audience for the summit are people that have jumped into entrepreneurship as a result of COVID. And we all going through, every single human around the planet have this shared experience. And we're going through that process of, in many ways, redefining who we are and what we care about. Mm-hmm. So I would love to start by hearing a little bit about you and what led you to write this phenomenal book.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. It's truly a pleasure and really grateful to be a part of it. So my journey kind of started in high school when I got into reading, and I started reading a number of different books, and just kind of occurred to me that the platform that some of these authors have has such a tremendous impact. And I had the thought in high school that someday I wanted to write a book, and I thought it would be much further down the road. But it ended up happening a lot sooner. But I went to Northern Illinois University and graduated with a finance degree. Started working in a couple different finance jobs, and then ended up at Merrill Lynch and been there the last 8 years. Grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, and just trying to enjoy the summers out here because the winters are very terrible.
Absolutely terrible. I live in the Northeast, and believe me, originally from Mexico City, so I have never got used to living in the snowy areas of the country. And I have lived actually in Chicago for a few years, many years ago, so I totally remember those brutal winters. So yes, leave it up for the last few weeks that we have a summer. So Taylor, there's you say something in your book that really stopped me in my tracks and really make me think about what we are all about. You said that our attempt to live a satisfying life through acquiring all that makes us happy are misguided. Mm-hmm. So tell us more about that. What does that mean for you?
So it's a great question. It kind of leads into the premise of the book, and one of the key kind of stories that I share is the story of Michael Phelps. And he, at his prime, had everything that anyone could ever want. He had fame, he had connections, he retired at a young age, he could basically do whatever he wanted. But as I share his story, he had some really challenging times after accomplishing all that he did. And he ended up in depression and really struggling with mental health. And so started to question, is this trajectory of measuring happiness as kind of the barometer for how we measure everything? Is that truly the way that we should go about, guiding our lives? And in looking at his story, I realized that a lot of us, myself included, kind of fall into that category of like, if I just had X, Y, or Z, I would be happy and everything would be great. And when you kind of break it down and you look at some of these people that have already done what we're maybe trying to do, why is it that they're not fully, completely happy? And so my proposal in that is that maybe we should be looking or searching for something else instead of just what makes us happy. Because at the end of the day, I think that we're created to want more than that, and happiness is a good byproduct of finding your purpose, but it's not the end all be all.
happiness can also be temporary, right?
Mhm.
So it's interesting that you guide us to think about our purpose in life. And like I said, your book couldn't be any more timely, because I think most of humanity is in that search right now. For this audience in particular, it may be that, the first step we took towards finding our purpose was to shift into entrepreneurship because
Yeah.
we think we want more out of life, right? We want more time with our family, more freedom, more wealth. But it has all the hints and all the flavors of finding our purpose.
Mhm.
And I think that is very powerful that in your book, you you look at helping us find our purpose through a lens of the intersection between passion, talent, pain, and love.
Mhm.
How did you land in those four areas, and how do you help? Can you help us find
Yeah,
that intersection?
it's a great question. And I think it does, end up being very important for entrepreneurs, because if you don't really know why you're starting this business or what is the mission or purpose behind it, you can easily burn out and kind of lose sight of that bigger picture. So those kind of key guideposts that you mentioned are really the structure, the foundation of finding purpose. And so the intersection of all those is kind of like the bullseye, right? So if we start by looking at what are we passionate about, we can gather some clues. Okay, I really, have a passion for travel, or I have a passion to help people. So that kind of gives us a good starting place, some things that give us some natural energy. But then beyond that, there's certain gifts and talents that we have that are unique to us, that no one else has. And so what are those, and how can we, put those to good use? Love, I think, has the kind of the supreme ability to give us the motivation to serve instead of looking to get, which I think is the kind of the key determining differentiating factor between pursuing happiness, because happiness in a way is kind of all about getting stuff for ourselves or acquiring things, whereas purpose is kind of the opposite. We're looking to give out of what we have, and how can we give back to the world, or impact, or use what we've been given to bless others. And then kind of the final, piece of that is our experiences. What are different things that we have gone through that we can then use that experience to help others? And when we start to list or look at each of those categories, there starts to kind of form some direction and some kind of practical areas where we can see, okay, we're uniquely equipped to serve in this capacity or in this area. And in many ways, if you think about, starting a business, it may have kind of happened in the same way. You saw a need, you realized you had a skill set to meet that need, and then here you are creating something to bring value to people. And so purpose really just goes, a little step further and says, well, why are you doing that? What is the true motivation behind that? And how can you let that permeate everything that you do?
Mhm, mhm. So what is, and that's like the search, right? So many of us spend our whole lives in search of what is my purpose? Why am I here? Or why, what is happening? So it's so interesting that you, at a young age, were called to help people to define or give us a guide to search for a purpose and hopefully find it. One thing that is very interesting in your book is that you offer a series of exercises and questions that could guide people in finding their purpose. So without giving the whole story away, I wonder if you could share with us either an exercise or some of the questions that we should consider as we are beginning our journey in searching our purpose.
Yeah, exactly. So there's kind of similar to the guideposts that we were just talking about, but there's kind of a workbook where you list out some various things. So the first thing is really figuring out what are you passionate about, and going kind of deeper is what are the core values that really give you energy, because there's certain things that we're passionate about doing, but maybe we won't be doing those all the time. And so what is it that, core values that really motivate or drive you? The next thing would be to look at specifically what are the areas that you have been equipped, the talents, the gifts that you have. And so by listing out the passions, listing out your gifts, listing out experiences that you've had, and then looking around you for opportunities, kind of listing those out as well. I'm a big whiteboard person, so I like kind of visually like seeing all of this out. And if you think about drawing lines, each of those kind of represents a line. Well, where they all intersect, that is ultimately where you should start looking for purpose. And so I think that from a practical standpoint, that's the most, the easiest first step to take is identifying these areas and looking to see where they all lead to.
And it's so interesting because, as you already highlighted, for entrepreneurs, that's basically how we all land in whatever it is that we're doing for a living. And it's so, it's a reflection of the exercises that you offer, right? Because it is interesting to think about a successful entrepreneur that may start with something. It almost is that reflection of trying to exercise, trying to find that purpose, and eventually evolves over time in landing into whatever it is that they really love. And that is when you find a really successful entrepreneur, because they have found their purpose. So it's a reflection of their soul almost, whatever it is that they're doing.
And you can tell when you talk to them, those that are really fired up and they have kind of a deeper reason, a deeper purpose or mission behind doing whatever they do besides making money or accumulating various things. So you can definitely distinguish that.
And like I said, it's incredible that we have been given as humanity an opportunity right now. We have the chance to take it or not take it, but it is a moment in history, in our living time. When have we ever been in a situation where the whole world has stopped and we have given the opportunity to rethink who we are and what's important for us? You mentioned that faith is also an important component of this search. So tell us a little bit about that. How did you find the connection between all these elements and your faith?
Yeah. It's a great question. So that actually started my journey. In high school, I had hit a really, really low point, kind of felt really worthless in essence. And I felt lost, confused, depressed. And it was kind of in that low moment that God showed up in my life and basically revealed that I had a purpose, that he had created me for a reason that was bigger, than anything that I was living for. And upon discovering that, it changed the trajectory of my life. I had kind of a reestablished confidence in who he said that I was. And that really kind of launched me on this missional journey, because up until that point, I was so consumed with just living for myself. I didn't really, think about other people. And so ever since then, faith has been such an instrumental part of my life, and sharing that in the intersection of that and purpose to me is so important. When we look at even just the practical steps that we were just kind of talking about, how do you find that purpose? If it's not connected to a bigger source, if it's not connected to God or plugged into his vision for our lives, it can burn us out. Like we can easily kind of run ashore and lose steam. And so one of the things I talk about in the book is this idea that God is writing a narrative, right? You think about the picture of humanity and why we're all here and when it all started. God is creating and writing the story, and we have an opportunity to be a part of that. And so when we connect our purpose with his, it multiplies the purpose that we have the ability to display. In fact, that was one of the key things is that faith is actually a purpose multiplier. People can find purpose without faith. You can volunteer and help and serve, but if you don't have that component and include that component, you're missing out on a big portion of meaningful life.
Yeah, I mean, so powerful. I'm still like so shocked that you found this gift that God had given you um, at an early age. So you could spend your life helping the rest of us finding our purpose and sharing the message. Um, as we come close to the end of our time together, I wonder if you could help us think about 3 things that we can implement immediately while we wait for your book to arrive from Amazon to our homes tomorrow in Prime service. But seriously, while people get your book, what are 3 things that people can start doing today to start their journey towards finding their purpose?
Mhm. So I think that the first thing is recognizing, well, I guess would say kind of the myth of this idea of living for happiness and pursuing pleasure. And so by recognizing that is kind of the first step. So if we analyze the different reasons that we do what we do, if that is a reason that kind of comes up, identifying or being aware of it is really, really step one. So thinking about all the things that you do, are there any areas that are kind of driven by more of a shallow kind of reason relating to happiness or pleasure. The second thing would be to get more specific in terms of why are you doing what you do. And so many times, if you don't stop to ask, you may not ever have thought about, why is it that I work where I do? Why do I get up every day and go to this office and do this career? And so having those questions that kind of drill down, okay, maybe it'll give you pause to say, okay, here's why I do it, and reconnect with that purpose. Or maybe it leads you in a different direction. And so figuring out where you can have the most impact, I think, is vital. So those would be the first 2. And then the last one is understanding this shift in mindset that essentially happens. Because we're all busy, we all have so many things going on. The last thing we need is another to-do list or something else to add to check off our box. So purpose is not meant to be added to that list. It's essentially, we're meant to live with purpose, not for it. And so it's not something necessarily external, but something that we have internal that we then give out of. And so having that realization or that recognition to say, okay, I'm not striving for this idea of purpose, but actually I've been given various things that allow me to then bless others. And so looking at purpose through that lens, I think will change everything, and it'll actually allow it to be more of a sustaining endeavor as opposed to just something else that we're kind of striving after.
This has been so powerful. And, we often ask ourselves, as an entrepreneurs, you need to find your why before you do your job or start your business. But it's really your purpose, what we are asking. So your book gives us a very concrete process in which it could help us to actually find our purpose. So I definitely want to thank you for writing the book and for being with us today, because I know it will impact so many people that will be listening to you today and for many times to come. Taylor, where can we stay in touch with you? I mean, as I mentioned, the link to the book is right below this video, so people will be able to access and order your book right away. But what about we want to know more about you or stay in touch? Where can we do that?
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Tyler Wedell on LinkedIn. There's a Instagram page as well, the Pursuit of Purpose _book. So either of those 2 places are great ways to connect.
That's fantastic. I cannot thank you enough. I know that the listeners are going to be thrilled to have had the opportunity to connect with you. And I'm sure you will start getting a lot of people following you on Instagram and finding more about you. Thank you.
My
for joining
pleasure.
us.
Thank you so much for having me.